Welcome again to the Old State Capitol State Historic Site. I hope you guys are all enjoying your weekend here in Springfield. It has been a very special weekend for us, commemorating a very special event that touched the lives of millions of Americans 150 years ago and even more so today as we keep going through. So I'm happy to welcome the National Park Service for their Abraham Lincoln's Journeys program that began in Washington, D.C. and is concluding here in Springfield today. So please help me welcome the National Park Service.
Good morning, everyone. So before I start our introductory remarks, I do have to say that this has been a great journey, and it's been, this is a little bittersweet. This is our last program, our 27th program, over the time period of 16 days. And so we've done 16 cities, 16 days, starting in Washington, D.C. and ending here in Springfield. So we're very excited to be here with you. My name is Vanessa Torres. I'm a park ranger at Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area in Los Angeles, California.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Duey Kol. I'm a United States Park Ranger based out of Washington, D.C.
We are honored to participate in the National Park Service's commemoration of the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's funeral. On behalf of the National Park Service, we would like to thank everyone who made this event possible. We are honored to be with you here today as we all pause to consider this crucial moment in our nation's history. On April 14, 1861, an American flag was lowered over a fort named Sumter in a harbor named Charleston. Many Americans look upon that event as the beginning of the American Civil War. 4 years later to that day, that same American flag was raised over that same fort. Many Americans viewed that event as the end of the American Civil War. Yet there was one shot left to be fired. That evening in Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., our 16th President, Abraham Lincoln, was shot. The following morning, across the street in Peterson's house at 7:22 a.m., he passed away. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton stated, "Now he belongs to the ages."
In April and May of 1865, 150 years ago this month, a train carried Abraham Lincoln's remains from our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. to Springfield, Illinois. The prairie lawyer from Illinois was going home. All the major cities along the route held funerals for him. Now, if you can imagine, thousands of Americans, veterans, soldiers, men, women, and children, they all came to pay Lincoln their last final respect. As the Americans attended the funerals, you can well imagine there were many questions. What would we do now? What will America become? What should America become? What would he want us to do? What would he want America to become?
A fundamental question was at stake. In 1865, 4 million African American men, women, and children were now free. Should they become full citizens? Should they have the right to vote and hold political office? As we will learn, Lincoln was not silent on these questions. With a nod to the founding generation, Lincoln wrote in 1863 that this nation had been conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Would Reconstruction lead to the fulfillment of the nation's founding ideals of freedom and equality? Would there be a new birth of freedom? Americans did not know how it would turn out, just as we cannot predict what will happen tomorrow. Our ancestors a century and a half ago did know one thing, however, that things would be different. But no one knew what that change would be, what that story would be.
My story began 40 years ago when my parents survived genocide in Cambodia, separated from their families as young adults, forced into slave labor, and working 16 hours a day. It was awful. In less than 4 years, 2 million people lost their lives out of a country of 7 million. My parents, they were determined to have their freedom even at the cost of death. Not knowing where they would end up, they courageously fled Cambodia to the refugee camps in Thailand, where my sister and I were born. And we are among the lucky ones. In less than 3 years, we were sponsored to Boston, Massachusetts, where we now live, chasing the American dream. And even though we grew up really poor and didn't initially speak English, with hard work and education, we made it.
My story began a little over 100 years ago when my great-great-grandparents entered Texas from Mexico and Spain. With 2 dimes in their pocket and working their hands to the bone as migrant workers, picking vegetables and fruit to be able to put food on their table, they strive for the American dream. It is because of them and their hard work and sacrifice that I'm able to stand before you here today. It is our privilege and honor on the 150th anniversary of the end of the American Civil War to introduce to you Abraham Lincoln. Listen to what he has to say. What you will hear is taken from Lincoln's actual words, words that convey hope for his country, for his story, and for our story. Ladies and gentlemen, Abraham Lincoln.
My friends and fellow citizens, I am so pleased to have this opportunity to appear before you this day, and especially to be able to say that we can meet together this day, not in sorrow any longer, but with gladness of heart. Surely the evacuation of Petersburg and Richmond, the surrender of the principal insurgent armies, has finally given us hope. We can now see peace, and its joyous expression can hardly any longer be restrained. It was almost a week after the glorious news was received that it finally began to penetrate this callous soul. Mrs. Lincoln and I, in fact, were on our way to the theater on the 14th of last month. I had been to that place so many times to simply relieve myself of the preponderance and constancy of the weight of war. And now I could enter John Ford's theater a happier man for the first time. But in the midst of all the rejoicing, of course, he from whom all blessings flow must not be forgotten. In fact, a call for a national Thanksgiving has already been prepared and will be duly promulgated. And of course, we cannot forget those whose harder part has given us cause for rejoicing. Their honors will not be parceled out to that of any other. You know, I happened to be very near the front, right at the end. I had the great news, the great privilege of transmitting much of the recent good news to you before the final surrender. But my friends, no part of the honor for either plan or execution belongs to me. It goes to General Grant and his brave men and skillful officers. It is to them it all belongs. Oh, I think it would be hard to say whether anything has been more bravely and well done than at Petersburg and Gettysburg, Murfreesboro, and many fields of lesser note. And of course, we certainly cannot forget Uncle Sam's webbed feet. Not only out on the open seas or across the broad bays, but down the rapid river, up the narrow muddy bayou, where even the ground was a little damp, they have made their tracks. I wish to tender my thanks to all, for this great union, for the principle it lives by. I want to tender my thanks to to all. And I am happy to say that on this occasion, finally, I can be afforded opportunity to say some hopeful things respecting the future. And of course, once my brief remarks are concluded, if any of you wish to tender questions to me on some matters not regarding war for a change, I will be most happy to offer my humble answer. You know, it's interesting, having served 4 long years, arduous years, in a time of great national peril, it has repeatedly come to me that perhaps I might myself not even outlast this war, that once the war finally concluded, my work would be done. And yet here I am, a re-election, a re-inauguration safely behind me, and perhaps I can now breathe a sigh of relief. But even with these things in mind, I want to say that I view this call to a second term as in no way a flattering statement about myself, but rather as a simple judgment by the American people that perhaps one such as I, having passed through these last 4 difficult years, may be perhaps better qualified to conduct the ship of state safely to fixed moorings, better than perhaps someone not so hardly schooled to the task as I have been. But I want to also express my gratitude to divine providence for safely conducting us through it all to these peaceful shores, and to you, the American people, for your renewed confidence in me for yet another 4 years. But I want to say, I accept this renewed trust, even with its onerous and perplexing difficulties. Who would have supposed 4 years ago, when I was making my way to Washington, all eyes were focused so anxiously upon the thought of an impending civil war. All of us dreaded it. In fact, I think all sought to avert it. While my first inaugural address was being delivered in Washington city, devoted altogether to saving this union without war, there were already insurgent agents operating in that city, devoted altogether to destroying the Union without war, to simply divide effects by negotiation. Both parties deprecated war. But one would rather make war than let the nation survive, and the other would accept war rather than let it perish. And the war came. Approximately 1/8 of our population at the time were colored slaves, and not located throughout the entirety of the Union, but primarily in the southern part of it. And all knew that somehow this element of slavery constituted a peculiar and a powerful interest, and that this interest was indeed the cause of the war. To strengthen, perpetuate, and extend this interest was the cause for which these insurgents would rend the Union, while this government claimed no right other than to simply restrict the territorial enlargement of it. Neither party expected for this war, for the magnitude, my friends, the duration which it obtained. Neither supposed that the very cause of the conflict should cease with, even before the conflict itself had ceased. Each looked for an easier triumph, a result less fundamental and astounding. Both read the same Bible, prayed to the same God, and each invoked his aid against the other. Now, it may seem strange to us that anyone would dare to ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces, but let us judge not, lest we also be judged. The prayers of both could not be answered. That of neither has been answered fully. The scripture tells us, woe unto the world because of offenses. For it must needs be that offenses come, but woe unto that man by whom the offense cometh. My friends, if we shall suppose that American slavery is one of those offenses which in the providence of God must needs have come, and which having continued through his appointed time, he now wills to remove, and that he gave to both North and South this terrible war, as the woe due unto those by whom the offense came. Shall we discern therein any departure from those divine attributes which believers in a living God have always ascribed to him? Fondly have we hoped, fervently have we prayed that this mighty scourge of war might speedily pass away. And yet if God had willed that it continued until all of the wealth piled by the bondman's 250 years of unrequited toil should have been sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn by the last should have been repaid by another drawn by the sword, nevertheless it would have been said, as was said some 3,000 years ago, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Now, in saying these things, I do not wish to be understood as having any particular prejudice against Southern people. My friends, I think that they are just what we would have been had we been born under their circumstances. You know, if slavery had already existed amongst us, we would not have just instantly gotten rid of it either. And I think if it had not already existed amongst them, they would not have introduced it. I've always believed this of people, South as well as North. Doubtless there are people on both sides that never would have had a slave under any circumstances. And I frankly believe that there are those among us now who would gladly see it reintroduced if only they could find means. But so far as I am concerned, my friends, I have no intention, I repeat what I said nearly 2 years ago before the re-election. I have no intention of retracting or modifying the Proclamation of Emancipation, nor shall I be returning to slavery any of the persons that have been freed by the terms of that document or any of the subsequent acts of Congress. Now, if the people should, by whatever mode or means, make it an executive duty to re-enslave those persons, I'm afraid some other, and not myself, will have to become their instrument to perform that. Now, in saying these things, I do not intend any compliment to my own wisdom or sagacity. I frankly do not claim to have controlled events. I confess plainly, events have controlled me. Now, finally, at the end of this momentous struggle, this nation's condition is not what either party or any man alone devised or expected. God alone can claim it. And so, with high hope for the future, I will not be making any predictions respecting it. And there are actually four small things that perhaps expectations and things that I do wish to bring up. As you well know, the passage through Congress last January of an amendment to the United States Constitution for the abolishment of slavery throughout the several states is now ratified. It is a laudatory event, worthy of repeated congratulations to the people. And yet, for this noble act of Congress, there remains yet a task for us as well, and that is to ensure its ratification in 27 at least of the now 36 United States of America. And I am convinced, my friends, that this people will perform it both with speed and alacrity. My friends, the Proclamation of Emancipation, I would be the first to admit, had many attending evils. From the beginning, it was questioned as to its legality. It was a subject of curiosity as to its applicability to those who had not had opportunity or perhaps means to flee their bondsmen during the late war, as bondsmen, I should say. And also it has been brought up that those who did, does it apply to their children? But this amendment, my friends, is the king's cure for all of these attendant evils. It brings all of those questions to an end. And may I again tender my congratulations to you, the people, and to the world for a great moral victory. Now, with, of course, the recent good news, the reconstruction, the reauthorization of the national government in the formerly seceded states, reconstruction as it is called, is pressed much more closely upon us. And my friends, it is fraught with difficulties. I intend to proceed with due caution. There are those who have censured me of late in the press and to my face for my part in setting up and seeking to sustain the loyal government of Louisiana, formerly rebellious. Now, my friends, I well understand that it would have been much more satisfactory if we could have obtained 50,000 or 40,000, perhaps even 20,000. But we did obtain 12. It would have been much more amenable and agreeable to many, including myself, if we could have conferred the elective franchise, the vote, upon the colored man. I personally would have been much gratified if it could have been conferred upon him immediately, at least those with education and those who served in the late war in our armed forces, Army, Navy. But the question of the vote, I frankly think it, may I say something? It is hard for me to understand how people claiming Christianity could think otherwise, or even anybody with an ordinary regard for right and wrong, to read in the scripture as the word of God, as you would that men should do unto you, do ye also unto them, and then to deny to an entire race of men what no man would wish upon himself, to me is an insult to God and to his church. And, well, I should forbear, as I said. Let us judge not, lest we also be judged. But the question of the reconstruction of the Louisiana government has been presented as to whether or not it is quite all that is desirable. I think a better framing of that question is, would it be wiser to simply take it as it is, or to reject and disperse it? Now, if we do the latter, my friends, we say to some 12,000 people who are laboring with us in the ranks that we care nothing for what has hitherto been accomplished. We say to the white men of Louisiana, you are worthless. You are worse than worthless, and we will not help you, nor will we be helped by you. And to the colored man, we say, this cup of liberty which your former masters have of late held to your lips, we now dash from your lips and leave it to you as to how the scattered contents may be gathered at whatever time and by whatever means. But if we refuse, if we stand on what we have hitherto accomplished, the converse of all of this is true. We say to those 12,000 that we value what you have accomplished. We encourage them, inspire them to feed, to nurture, to water, to grow, and to bring to maturity the same work in which we ourselves are engaged. And the colored man, seeing thus all gathered around him in his behalf, will be inspired to new courage, to new daring to proceed to his goal. Granted, he did not obtain the elective franchise. Will he sooner obtain it by us backing over everything that we have hitherto accomplished and destroying that work, or by standing our ground and insisting on moving forward until we accomplish the goal? I think the latter. Now, what I have said about Louisiana could as well be said about the several other states that we are seeking to restore to their proper relation with the United States. However, their circumstances are changing. Important, sudden sometimes changes are occurring in each of those several states peculiar to their situation. The whole case with all is entirely new to all of us. My friends, I refused to be confined to an exclusive, inflexible plan. It would surely become an entanglement to us, even days hence. Now, obviously, important principles may and must be inflexible. So the present situation, as the saying goes, may require that I make some announcement to the Southern people in future days or months. In fact, I have considered such a thing and will do so once I am convinced that it is suitable that such action be made. On another subject entirely, as you may recall, in my last annual message to Congress back in December, I made it clear that I believe the Bureau of Indian Affairs must be reformed. And my friends, once these matters of war and reconstruction are safely secured and put aside, I intend to do what I can to pursue justice for the Indian, both to his and to my satisfaction. And anybody who perceives the situation as I have come to over these past 4 years would agree with me that the Bureau of Indian Affairs is a great piece of wickedness. And as we fear God, we must determine that it be reformed. Now, as to matters a little more general, with the return of peace, of course, the original energy and enterprise and animation of this country, with their renewed strength and vigor, is upon us. The former and long-standing projects of uniting the eastern and western shores with a transatlantic railroad and telegraphic cable are now proceeding with great success. As some of you may know, from the east westward, it has now successfully proceeded to beyond 100 miles of Omaha City out in Nebraska. And in the far west, I am told that originating at a point somewhere around Sacramento, California, it has proceeded east into Nevada near the Great Bend of the Truckee River. My friends, we will live to see this great work accomplished. On the other subject of the telegraphic linking, of course, we have seen much success. But in the last session of Congress, they approved of a new branch crossing the Bering Straits through Asiatic Russia. And there is, in fact, an independent company of American citizens now laboring with signal success, not only with the approval and support of this government, but with that of Russia and England as well. And I am told of late that several of the South American states have sent notice of their high appreciation of this enterprise, their readiness to cooperate with us in constructing lines tributary to a world encircling electrical means of communication. Now, you ask, what about the Eastern Link? Before the war, of course, the transatlantic cable was unfortunately severed, but I am told that it is now set upon with a new vigor, and we can expect its early accomplishment. Lastly, the financial affairs of this government have throughout the course of the late war been conducted with signal success, both under the administrations of former Secretary Chase and now Mr. Fessenden. My friends, our new financial system, conceived in the crucible of war, has proven itself more than acceptable, not only to the capitalists among us, but to ordinary people like you and I. So those are my hopes and expectations in short. What will the future bring? No man knows. I frankly did not expect to be reelected. Such a thing has not occurred since the days of Jackson himself. But I am thankful for the approval of this people for another 4 years as a signal of their continued support of that great principle upon which our future hopes and liberties rest. You see, my friends, I still believe that sentiment enshrined in our Chart of Liberty remains the great fundamental principle upon which all liberty rests. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. I have never had a feeling politically that did not spring from the sentiments embodied in that document. And I love the sentiments of those old-time men. Oh, this was their majestic interpretation of the economy of the universe. Their lofty, wise, noble understanding of the justice of the Creator to His creatures. To all of His creatures, my friends, to the whole great family of man. In their enlightened belief, nothing stamped with that divine image was sent into this world to be trodden on or brutalized by its own fellow creatures. And you see, they grasped not just the race of men then living, but they reached forward to seize upon the farthest posterity. They erected a beacon to guide their children, their children's children, the countless myriads who would inhabit this nation in future generations. Wise statesmen that they were, they knew the tendency of liberty to beget prosperity, and prosperity to breed tyranny. And so they enshrined those immortal words in a public document, so that when in the future, if some man or some faction or some interest would set up their doctrine that none but this class or that class was entitled to those same inalienable rights, that their posterity my friends, you and I could look up once again to the Declaration of Independence and take courage to renew the battle that our fathers began, so that truth, justice, mercy, all of the humane and Christian virtues would never be extinguished from this land, and no man would hereafter ever dare to limit or circumscribe the great principle upon which liberty rests. My friends, the question of the hour is, cannot this government be reconstructed, restored on that same principle? If it can, I will consider myself one of the happiest men alive if I can help to so do. If it cannot, my friends, it will be awful if this government cannot be restored without giving up that principle. I was about to say, I would rather be assassinated on this very spot than ever surrender that. Well, I extended to you hours ago an offer to tender me questions. I suppose I should bring myself to do that. I am loath to close. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. Surely the mystic cords of memory, stretching over every battlefield and every patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the course of union when touched, as surely they will be by the better angels of our nature. And so, with malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish this work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just, a lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. Well, my friends, I do wish to offer an opportunity. If anyone wishes to tender questions, I will be more than happy to accept and perhaps provide an answer to you. If you feel I'm a trifle hesitant in offering the first question, I'm happy to take the second one first. Well, I really meant that. If somebody wishes to, and I know some of you do have some things to attend to quickly. Oh, we have one brave soul in the back. Yes, sir?
Mr. President, you intend to run for a third term.
Well, I'll tell you, I am a very fortunate man under the providence of God to have been elected to a second. And you know, this wise man looking so beneficently upon us from that portrait, chose to limit himself. Isn't that not the secret of self-government, of liberty? If we all govern ourselves. And I think I should probably follow in his footsteps in many respects. Anybody else?
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
my name is Martin Jones.
Yes.
I traveled to Springfield, Massachusetts to be here
Yes.
because I wanted to speak to you about a very depressing matter.
Yes.
My parents are from the Deep South.
Yes, sir.
My mother was born in 1930 in Pickens County, Alabama, and my father was born in Worthington, Georgia. And they are descendants of slaves. So on behalf of them and their parents and their great-great-parents, and on behalf of myself, Mr. President, I thank you.
Let us do that once again from the same level. Now, if we do have a few more moments, and I would be most happy to. Did you wish to say something? No. I would be most happy to take any other questions from any man or woman or child. Oh my goodness, isn't she handsomely attired?
How did you deal with all your grief in your life?
How did I deal with all the grief in my life? Sometimes just the sight of one such as you assuages nearly all of it. I had a little boy about your age. How old are you? Yes, just a trifle older than you. He's an angel now. Well, I have my ways. Sometimes when I'm feeling particularly bad, I get Taddy. He's still alive and kicking. And we'll have a wrestling match. Now, that's not a particularly ladylike thing to do, is it? No. But we have, sometimes we'll toss about a ball. And sometimes I like to get a good old-fashioned joke book and just sit down and laugh until my sides hurt. Yep. Sometimes if you can't find anything funny in your own life, you got to look someplace else to find it, don't you? Sometimes I go to the theater and I just forget all my troubles for maybe an hour. Thank you, sweetheart. Anybody else? Yes, my friend? How did I choose my vice presidential partner? Well, you know, 4 years ago, having been born in a slaveholding state and being something of a southerner myself, we had slaveholders just a few miles from us as a boy in Kentucky. It seemed like a good, safe alternative would be to pick a good, stiff abolitionist for my running mate. Nobody would dare kill me with that. But then, last year, it seemed like the whole world was eating out of the hands of the Republicans. And so when I was unanimously nominated in the convention, I largely thought it would be a good gesture to let the convention themselves choose my running mate. And you know, Andy Johnson, a brave man, the only United States senator from the South, from a slave-owning state, that stayed loyal through it all and was instrumental after Corinth and Donaldson and so forth in taking the Cumberland River across the broad reaches of Tennessee, became a provisional governor, and has helped us immensely. So I think that we'll do well. I really have few worries. The vice president has almost no duties whatsoever. Somebody else. Yes, over here. Oh, my goodness. Was my biggest influence the Bible? Well, you know, there are days when my biggest influence is Mrs. Lincoln. You'll learn those things in a few years. But I would say, very simply put, all of those fine and fancy words in the Bible can all be summed up in two simple propositions. If you love the Almighty with all your heart, soul, and mind, and treat other people the way you'd like to be treated, you've got a big job ahead. You don't have to worry about every little jot and tittle. If you master that, you'll do well. And that's been a guiding light in my life ever since I was your age. I still haven't quite mastered it, but I'm still trying. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am? Oh my goodness, yes. We are now witnessing a continued and with new vigor expansion of our system of rails. I'm told that now we have nearly 3,000 miles of road right in this state alone. So we have a wonderful race of prosperity ahead of, my friends, if we hold fast to those simple principles. Yep. Anybody else? Oh, yes, my friend. He said, do you feel like your predecessor, Mr. Buchanan, could have done more to prevent the Civil War? Are you trying to get me in trouble? Well, as I said, with malice toward none and charity for all. You know, it's always difficult to know quite how one would conduct themselves wearing somebody else's skin. And I think that Mr. Buchanan probably did about as good a job as he could have politically, given the circumstances and the person he is. If I had been in his position, it would have been much different. I can guarantee you that. But I wasn't. And unfortunately, in this world, we never have a choice between that which is perfect and that which is not perfect. You will find that out, my young friend, once you get married. And we just take what we get, don't we? Mm-hmm. I'll talk to you afterwards, sir. Oh, yes, my friend. Yes, could I describe my relationship with William Seward, Secretary of State? William Henry Seward is an amazing man. And he, in the beginning, now I had two former governors in my cabinet. I've always wondered how the Mormons managed with more than one wife in the house. And I began to get a vision. But I made it clear that there would be one decision maker in the cabinet fairly early. And once that was a settled issue, we got along quite well. Mr. Seward, Governor Seward, as we must call him, has been actually a very dear friend to me of late. And someone asked how I dealt with the sorrows. Sometimes I go to Mr. Seward's house, not very far away, just a little north of the executive mansion, and he regales me with stories for hours, fills the room with smoke so I cannot see his proboscis any longer. He has quite a nose. And we have a grand time. Yes. He's particularly good once he's had 2 full glasses of brandy. This is a very warm relationship. Yes, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me introduce and thank Mr. Fritz Klein.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, listen, what a privilege and pleasure this has been. I just wanted, before you go, let you know that what you just heard was composed almost entirely of Lincoln's own words, some of it a trifle paraphrased. You heard almost all of his second inaugural address, which he gave in March of 1865, 150 years ago. And some of the projections about the future were things from his last message to Congress in December of '64. There were a couple excerpts I took out of his first inaugural address. We are not now enemies, but friends, as applicable after the war as it was before. And then, of course, the one about I would rather be assassinated on the spot was also given in '61, just a sentence or two from his speech out in front of the Independence Hall in Philadelphia. But I hope you enjoyed it. We put it together. You know, we are commemorating a very sad event, but all of us treasure, by doing this, the legacy that Lincoln represents. Somebody on Facebook said to me, the one man that unites us all. And there's real truth there. And it was the principle he preached. And I wanted to give a good long portion of it about simply treating other people the way we would like to be treated. That is, Lincoln said that was the thing, the principle that gave liberty. And he said we should sacrifice unceasingly on its altars. If we do, my friends, we have no troubles ahead. That is what unites us, and that's why Lincoln is such an icon today, because he lived it. Let us all do that. We'll be better people and a better nation for doing so. Thank you again.